I'm going to call this meeting to order. Would someone move item 1.03?
Yes. Mr. DeGiulore?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall? Mrs. Lyon?
Yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
And Mrs. Alvagore?
Yes.
I'd like to welcome those that are watching the meeting this evening, and I would like to share with you that if you should have a question or a comment, you may do so through an email at clerk@fulton.cnyric.org. You may find that web address on our school district website. Mr. Polvino, I am turning this meeting over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Lisi, can you place up the document, please? Thank you. We're not going to go through all of the slides tonight. We've seen a number of them, but I always like to be able to have a frame of reference for you to kind of tell our story up to this point. So we'll work you through and we'll go from there, Mr. Lisi. Not presenting anymore.
2 seconds.
All righty. All right, we'll try that again. All right. So what here this evening, we're going to present the 2021-22 budget, the final proposal for your consideration. Next slide, Mr. Lisi. We'll go right through these. That's this evening, and the next steps will be the May 5th public budget hearing, if all goes well this evening. Next, please. At the root of everything we do is our mission and our vision. And I'm not going to read those, but every decision we make comes back to those. Next slide, please. Our beliefs and our guiding principles. And I think, throughout our discussions, throughout this budget process, I think we've touched on many or all of these, and at the center of everything that we're doing, and they will be as we continue to evolve with this budget, as well as our federal stimulus funds as well. Next slide, please. Reminder about coherence in our district. It's that focus on collective commitment, making sense, sticking together, making sure that we have consistency of purpose, practice, and shared commitment. So, and again, that comes back to the center line. And again, once again, I always thank the board for the opportunity to have this strategic coherence plan. I think it's provide a center line during some very difficult times over the last year and a half, and it continues to do so as we come out the other side and as we prepare for the coming year. Next slide, please. These are our goals. I'm not going to go through those, but these are the areas, the goal areas, strategic intents in each of the areas of our strategic plan. Next slide, please. This is the budget parameters that were identified by our Board of Education on December 15th, and we've come back to those each time. You can see central to that is our strategic coherence plan in each of the areas. Next slide, please. As we evolved, we shared some of the implemented items that are going on with our plan and the ongoing, and those are on the next 3 slides, and we won't go through those, but leadership literacy is right there. Next slide. On to instruction, social, emotional, developmental health. Next slide, please. Family engagement and innovation. When you look at all of the articles and things coming out across the country, I think we did a good job identifying those 6 areas. They seem to be very central to conversations as schools are reopening and re-engaging and preparing for next school year as well. Next slide, please. These were the highlights that we shared with you at the last board meeting with respect to the New York State budget and the increases around foundation aid, as well as the excitement. Although I did share with you today, the rural schools talked about foundation aid and a number of things. That was a great article that's in your daily update. Next slide, please. We shared with you the budget that we presented last week was just our revenues. And you could see that we had a shortfall of $356,000. We had a discussion at the board meeting. And on the next slide, we also, I went through the tax cap. This is the 10-year summary of our tax cap. It's just always good to know where we've been and where we are. We're going to be recommending a 0% this evening. Next slide, please. There was a lot of discussion at the last meeting, so we did add a slide here. So I'm going to look for your feedback, either tonight or down the road, just a little bit of trying to give more information with respect to definitions around tax levy versus tax rate. So it's just something that we added. And I think your feedback will be great, because as we move through the budget process, it'll be good for us to make sure that as we're presenting to our community, that these are areas where we're clear about what each of these terms means. Next slide, please. And our fund balance and reserves is in the next section. It just shows that over the last 3 years, we've had a nice change of over $2 million to our fund balance. We're postured as good as we could be, close to 4%, which are the limits. So we couldn't be, as I said, postured any better. And with the good news around the increase in foundation aid for this school year, as well as the federal supplementals, it's good to see where we're at right now. Next slide, please. The budget increase that we're going to be talking about this evening is a 3.3% or $2.43 million. It includes contract costs, salary, and benefits. It adds one 12 1-to-1 teacher for a special education class and a teaching assistant in that program. And it maintains all programs and supports. Next slide. Some of the reductions to get us here were $350,000 in technology. We did 100,000 position elimination based on reduced student need, and that was in the area of the teacher for the deaf, and that was based on the fact that IEPs indicated that we will be able to do that through contracted services. 100,000 from our health benefit costs. Fingers crossed, we continue to be underspending our health benefits to this point at tune of about 98%, which is good news. Hopefully we'll finish the year strong and keep that trend going. And $55,000 in supplies and contractual. And with the additions of 150,000 for the teacher and the TA, the net change is a reduction of 455,000 over time from budgets earlier this spring till now. Next slide, please. So we had a discussion at the last meeting with respect to the $356,000 gap. And on the next slide, please. At our last meeting, we determined to use the use of reserved and unassigned fund balance. We discussed that at the last meeting. We are not increasing the tax levy, nor are we making any additional reductions. Next slide, please. So our proposed budget for your consideration this evening. On one page, you can see our state aid increased to $52,224,000. Our tax levy will remain the same, 0% increase. Other revenues, that's our pilots, our Medicaid, all different types of pieces there, $2,034,000. Planned use of reserves, that's where we're going to make up the gap, $356,874 from there. And the total revenues will come to $76,230,000. We are underspending this year's budget. We will present that at the next budget meeting, our monthly update. Ms. Nichols, anything you'd add here? What is your projection at this time? Just if a ballpark figure right now, to give you an idea, if we're removing 356, we may be looking at how much, Kathy?
As I've been looking at it, I believe that we'll be underspending our budget by 800,000 to $1 million, and revenues look pretty good as far as coming in where they're supposed to. So hopefully we'll be putting 800,000 back into the reserves.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Next slide, please. These are the budget. This compares your budget adopted for 2021 versus the proposed in 21-22. Also, we have to have a contingency budget in place. So on this form, you'll see each of the areas are increase of 3.3%. If a contingency occurred, it would be 3.1. No changes in the tax levy. Permissible exclusions 223, and the proposed levy stays the same. So this is part of the budget notice, which will be sent also out to our constituents as well. Next slide, please. The three-part budget. Kathy, do you want to talk about three-part budget tonight? Or would you like me to?
You're doing a great job, Mr.
All right.
Paulino.
So the three areas of a budget, I just wanted to share if you wanted to share. There's three components to our budget program. Capital administrative program is the meat and potatoes, if you will. That's everything instructional. That's the most centered to our kids. You'll see an increase of about 1.3 million there. Our capital increase of about 600,000, and our administrative increase of about 478,000. That total comes up to about $453 million, or 3.3%. So that's our 3% or our three-part budget. Next slide, please. This breaks it down into each of the areas. The expenses in the program component, they reflect instructional supplies, materials, salaries, benefits. You can actually see where it's slight increase in regular ed, slight increase in special education, a little bit of an increase in special school, student services, benefits up about $500,000 as an anticipated. Summer school actually is about the same. And then you can see the difference is about $2 million or just there under. Next slide, please. Operations and maintenance. This is our district facilities and our debt service. So in our operations, a bit of an increase. We have in maintenance, slight increase, and in our debt service, also a slight increase. And in our benefits, you'll see just slight, about $50,000 in this area. And overall, just under 600,000 increased in the area of capital. Next slide, please. And then finally, some of the key items as far as the administrative component. I'm not going to read all those to you, but you can see the slight increases in each of those areas by function. Next slide, please. Pie charts are always a good thing. It shows that in our revenues, 68.5% are coming from state aid, 28.4% from the tax levy, and 3.1% from other. And then on our right, just to give you an idea of where we spend our money, program is 75% of our budget. Our budget, 14.4% is our capital and debt, and for our administrative, 10.6%. So, and those are very consistent with previous years. Next slide. And then this was a question that was at the last board meeting. I did go on the website to check the latest numbers. The latest data on the NYSED website with respect to per pupil expenditures is the 18-19. They have not got the 19-20 expenditures on there as of yet. But what this slide does demonstrate is that Fulton, compared to similar districts, and that's other small cities, the state identifies similar demographics to us, and we continue to underspend our similars. And all New York State schools, as well as in special education, we tend to also spend there. That's a trend that's been very consistent. In the slide that I shared, I believe in January, at a board meeting, you can actually see those areas, and we have consistently underspent. I think we're very efficient with our dollars, and I think we maximize our resources with that.
Thanks for including that slide, Brian. I really think it's helpful and it simplifies things for the community.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, great question that was brought up. So I was glad we were able to get that in there. I wish we had the latest data that would show the same trend. And the next slide, please. I believe that's. And then finally, on the federal stimulus funds, you saw these slides last time. We'll provide an update at the next board meeting with respect to federal stimulus. We've not received any guidance as of yet. I reached out to our district superintendent today, Chris Todd, And no further information at this point in time, but it is on the CSO agenda in early May. But we have already started putting things together. We had a great committee meeting, budget committee the other night. I had to step away, but I've heard that the meeting was very good and had generated some very good ideas with respect to how do we innovatively use the federal stimulus funds. So what you see on your screen is as the reminder that we received just over $4 million in CRRSA. But again, there's an application process. It's a one-time allocation and allowable use. Is the $10 million. If you stuck, will it move to the next slide there, Dom, or not? There it goes. And $10 million for the American Rescue Plan. Once again, that possibly go through 2024. So more information to come in the coming weeks with respect to the federal stimulus funds. And we look forward to gathering information from our community. There was some ideas generated at that budget committee about ways to gather some information and input as we design a plan that not only addresses the immediate needs and gaps that our kids may have social, emotionally, as well as academically, but also we need to think about that sustainability and capacity for the years to come so that we never have to take something off the table down the road. And I've seen that happen in districts, and I want to make sure that that does not happen here. So we want to maximize that. Next slide, please. And then the next couple of slides are just the general parameters for the use of those funds, because I know there's a lot of questions, in the community, because it is confusing, but federal funds are one time and they are supplemental. They do not supplant what's in your general budget. So I'm very happy that we're balancing the budget based on foundation aid and based on a little bit of use of reserves and fund balance this year is the best way to go about that. This year we're using reserves is what we've recommended. And so we'll be focusing on these parameters over the next few weeks and months as we go to maximize the use of the federal funds. You can just go through the next couple slides, Dom. Just lists more of the allowable uses for the federal funds. So those of you who are watching, you can reference this. It is in board docs. If you have ideas, please email the clerk, and we'll be more than willing to keep our list generating. It's going to be growing over time, and then we will prioritize and focus that. Next slide, please. And our next step will be hopefully a ratification of this this evening, and then presentation to the public on May 5th with a presentation to the entire community for vote. I believe it's May 19th. And with that, are there any questions this evening?
I just have one question, Mr. Palvino, and it's probably my mistake, but I just wanted to double check. With the line that says the Board of Ed budget projected for 2021, 2022 at $50,300. If memory serves me right, I always thought our budget was typically around the 10,000 mark.
Dom, can you go back to that slide? And Kathy, can you pull up on your three-part what last year's was? I may have it here. There it is. So Board of Education by yourself, I've actually got the three-part up on my screen here. You're right, Ms. Cooper, it's 13,740 and 13,500. Do you want to share?
There's other items. The annual meeting, the budget vote is included. The expenses are included in there. District clerk costs.
Yeah, but wasn't the annual meeting always included in there?
Yes. This has multiple. Sometimes we show you the budget by function, which is what I believe the monthly reports list all the functions. This combines several of them. Like under finance, that has auditing. It's my office. It has auditing.
Okay.
It has tax collection. It has a variety of. It has several of the functions together. So there's more than just the Board of Ed expenses in there.
And the other expenses are really our professional development as well. Not that we use that much, but right.
Yeah, I just remember seeing it around like the 10, 12, 13,000, and just to see 50,000, I was quite concerned.
Yes, no, it's 13,740 just for the Board of Ed lines.
Okay, thank you.
Fallon, in your another one of the documents that's on board docs is called 3-part. It's an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
And the first line, you're correct, is 1010 Board of Education 13740. So
Okay.
for your reference or the community's reference, you can actually see the different items under admin broken out and compared from last year to this year as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, was gonna do that, but when I go into board docs, when I'm in the meeting, I lose you guys. So I
Yep.
figured
Well,
I'd
it was a great catch because you're right. You knew that number. That was awesome. So thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? President Griffin, I turn it back to you, Ms. Griffin.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Robin,
overview. Yes.
I got my mic back.
All right. Congratulations. Welcome back.
Okay.
All right. So this brings us to item 3.01. Would someone move it?
Move it.
second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'll turn it over to you. I am a yes.
Okay. Mrs. Alvagore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
All right, this brings us to item 3.02.
Move it.
Second.
Are there any comments, questions? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay, Mrs. Alvagore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Item 4.01.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalore,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mrs. Alvagore.
Yes.
And to those that tuned in tonight, again, our appreciation from the board for you taking the time to join us this evening. We hope that you found this an informative meeting. And also, I did want to say really quickly on that the board appreciates all those people that helped out Superintendent Paul Vino by participating in his community committee. Everybody, be safe, be well, have a great evening.
I do have a question for Brian.
Yes.
Your father was a doctor. Your grandfather was a doctor. Your two brothers are doctors. What's the matter? Being a superintendent isn't good enough for him?
My mom was an amazing, amazing home economics teacher. One of us had to do it. So I decided it would be me.
Well, I think you made the right choice.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Take
Tim.
care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Bye.